Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Today we are going to study a new topic, which is high altitude and deep sea diving physiology. In this lecture, we are going to study the physiological responses of the body to high altitude, which is known as acclimatization. And we are going to study the mountain sickness, which is a condition or a disease that occurs when someone fails to acclimatize to high altitude. And we are going to study Casson's disease, which is related to deep sea diving. So first we are going to start with high altitude physiology. All of you know that the pressure of air at sea level is 760 millimeter of mercury. This is the barometric pressure of air at sea level. At 760 millimeter of mercury, the partial pressure of oxygen in the air is 160 millimeter of mercury. And when partial pressure of oxygen in the air is 160 millimeter of mercury, at this level of partial pressure of oxygen, the blood is 97% saturated with oxygen. So arterial oxygen saturation is 97%. As we ascend to high altitude, the change that occurs is a decrease in the barometric pressure. So there is a decrease in the barometric pressure as there is increase in height. At an altitude of about 10,000 feet, the barometric pressure reduces from 760 millimeter of mercury to 523 millimeter of mercury. And when the barometric pressure is 523 millimeter of mercury, the partial pressure of oxygen in the air is also decreased from 160 millimeter of mercury to 110 millimeter of mercury in the atmosphere. At this level of partial pressure of oxygen, the percentage saturation of blood with oxygen is also decreased. So the arterial oxygen saturation, it decreases, it reduces from 97% to 90%. So this is the basic change or the problem of high altitude. And that is, as we ascend to high altitude, there is decrease in the barometric pressure and there is a decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen in the air. And this decrease in the partial pressure of oxygen in the air, it causes a decreased oxygen saturation in the blood. But the body, it responds to this decreased partial pressure of oxygen and it tries to compensate the decreased partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude. So that adaptation of the body, that compensatory responses of the body to high altitude, these responses are together known as acclimatization. So acclimatization is getting used to high altitude. Mechanisms or the processes by which body it get used to high altitude. Or in simple words, we can say that acclimatization is adaptation to low partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude. In the previous lecture, we have talked about the effect of hypoxia on the body. Low partial pressure of oxygen in the atmosphere at high altitude also exposes the body to hypoxia. This we have discussed when we discussed the topic of hypoxia in detail. So at high altitude, the body responds to this low partial pressure of oxygen and tries to compensate it. So you must not confuse the effects of hypoxia on the body and the response of the body to hypoxia. Acclimatization is the response of the body or the adaptation of the body to hypoxia at high altitude, while effects of hypoxia are the actually the outcomes of hypoxia. That is what happens to the body as a result of hypoxia. And acclimatization is how does the body tries to compensate for the hypoxia. So it is adaptation to low partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude. The significance of acclimatization is that it decreases the deleterious effects of low partial pressure of oxygen on the body. See, these are the effects of hypoxia on the body. So if body adapts to, if body produces certain responses that compensate for hypoxia, that responses are going to decrease the effects of hypoxia on the body. So significance of adaptation to low partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude is number one, it decreases the harmful effects of low partial pressure of oxygen on the body. And when there is decreased harmful effects of low partial pressure of oxygen on the body, it will increase the work capacity of the body at high altitude. And it also allow a person to ascend to still higher level. So if body become acclimatized to a certain height, then a person can further ascend to higher level. So these are the significances of acclimatization. Again, I am repeating that it decreases the harmful effects of hypoxia or the low partial pressure of oxygen on the body, because body produces certain changes in response to hypoxia which try to compensate it, and by doing so the work capacity of the body is increased at the high altitude, and it also allows a person to still ascend to higher level. Now we are going to see what is mechanism of acclimatization, what responses are produced in the body by which the person adapts to low partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude. So during acclimatization, during process of adaptation to high altitude, the changes are seen in respiratory system, in cardiovascular system, in the blood, and in the tissues. Again, I am repeating, during process of acclimatization means that when one is getting used to low partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude, there are certain changes seen in different systems of the body, and these include the changes in the respiratory system, changes in the cardiovascular system, changes in the blood, and changes at tissue level. So we are going to see now these changes one by one. First, we are going to see what changes occur in the respiratory system. When a person ascends to high altitude, so immediate response to hypoxia is increase in the rate of pulmonary ventilation. Increase in the rate of pulmonary ventilation. Now this increase in pulmonary ventilation in response to low partial pressure of oxygen at high altitude, it is brought about by stimulation of peripheral chemoreceptors. We have studied the peripheral chemoreceptors when we talked about the control of respiration, and we know from our previous discussions that the stimulus for the excitation of the peripheral chemoreceptors is low partial pressure of oxygen. So at high altitude, there is low partial pressure of oxygen in the air which stimulates the peripheral chemoreceptors, because when the body is inhaling the air at low partial pressure, it also reduces the partial pressure of oxygen in the blood, as we have seen in a few slides before, that percentage saturation of the blood with oxygen is decreased. So decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the blood will cause stimulation of the peripheral chemoreceptors, and the stimulation of peripheral chemoreceptors will send signals to the respiratory center, and in turn there will be increase in the rate of pulmonary ventilation. Second change which is seen in the respiratory system is increase in the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. There is increase in the surface area of the respiratory membrane, and increase in the surface area of the respiratory membrane increases the diffusing capacity of respiratory membrane. Now this increase in the surface area of respiratory membrane is brought about by two changes or by two factors. Two factors or two changes are responsible for increase in the surface area of respiratory membrane. The first change is increased pulmonary ventilation. When during increased pulmonary ventilation, not only there is increase in the rate of respiration, but also there is increase in the depth of ventilation. So hyperventilation is there, and when someone is hyperventilating, there is stretching of the lungs or the stretching of the alveoli with a greater volume of air. Now stretching of the alveoli with the greater volume of air will cause stretching of the respiratory membrane. On the other side, there is also increase in the pulmonary blood flow. So increased pulmonary blood flow will also cause distension of the pulmonary capillaries. So these two changes, that is hyperventilation, second the increase in the pulmonary blood flow which cause distension of the pulmonary capillaries, both together increase the surface area of the respiratory membrane, and due to increase in the surface area of respiratory membrane, there is increased diffusing capacity of the respiratory membrane. And due to increased diffusing capacity of the respiratory membrane, more oxygen can diffuse from the alveoli into the blood in the pulmonary capillaries. Now we are going to see what changes occur in the cardiovascular system. In the cardiovascular system, there is increase in the heart rate because of sympathetic stimulation. There is increase in the heart rate due to sympathetic stimulation, and there is also an increase in cardiac output. So first change that occurs in the cardiovascular system is increase in the heart rate. It is brought about by stimulation of sympathetic nervous system, and there is also increase in the cardiac output. Cardiac output may increase up to 30%. Over a long period of time, there is increased number of systemic capillaries in the peripheral tissues. So there is angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is formation of new capillaries. So tissue capillarity is increased by angiogenesis, and by increasing the by increasing the number of systemic capillaries, more blood can flow through the tissues, and there will be more delivery of oxygen from the blood to the tissues by increasing the blood flow. So the changes in the cardiovascular system include the increase in the heart rate, increase in cardiac output, and there is growth of increased number of systemic circulatory capillaries, which is known as angiogenesis. So these are the responses of cardiovascular system to hypoxia at high altitude. Now coming to the changes in the blood. Hypoxia stimulates the production of erythropoietin. Hypoxia at high altitude or decreased partial pressure of oxygen in the body, it stimulates the secretion of erythropoietin, which is a hormone which stimulates the red cell production. Hypoxia basically causes the secretion of the hypoxia inducible factors, which in turn cause increased formation of erythropoietin. Now this erythropoietin in turn causes increased production of red cells. Increased production of red cells results in polycythemia. And you must remember that this polycythemia is a physiological response. This is physiological polycythemia, also known as secondary polycythemia. Secondary polycythemia, that is increased red cell production in response to hypoxia. You must differentiate it from the polycythemia vera. which is a pathological condition characterized by excessive production of red cells. So in case of polycythemia at high altitude, this is in response to hypoxia, and this is a physiological response and is also known as secondary polycythemia. Now, significance of this polycythemia is that it will increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, because the number of red cells is increased, so it will increase the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood, and it is a compensation to hypoxia at high altitude. In response to hypoxia, there is also increased formation of 2,3-biphosphoglycerate, 2,3-BPG. Now 2,3-BPG, we know from our previous discussion that it is bound to the globin chains of the hemoglobin. An increased concentration of 2,3-BPG, it shifts the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve to the right side, which means there is dissociation of oxygen from the hemoglobin and more amount of oxygen is delivered to the tissues. So in blood there are two changes. There is increase in the red cell production because of secretion of erythropoietin, and second, there is increased formation of 2,3-BPG, which increases the dissociation of oxygen from the hemoglobin. It increases the delivery of oxygen to the tissues by shifting the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve to the right side. Now coming to the changes at cellular level. Now the changes that occur in the cells, these are known as cellular acclimatization. Adaptation of the cells to hypoxia, this is known as cellular acclimatization. Now during cellular acclimatization, there is increased number of mitochondria. Not only the number of mitochondria increases, but also there is increase in the size of the mitochondria. So mitochondria, they are increased in their number and size, and there is increase in the cellular oxidative enzymes as well. Now because of these two changes in the cells, that is increased number of mitochondria and an increase in the oxidative enzymes in the cells, the ability of the cells or the tissues to utilize oxygen is increased. And also there is an increased amount of myoglobin in the muscles. Myoglobin is a protein in the muscles which can bind with oxygen. So myoglobin amount is increased also. So these are the changes that occur in the cell, and collectively these changes are known as cellular acclimatization. So all these changes helps the body to compensate the hypoxia at high altitude. And these changes are seen in a person who migrates from the sea level to the high altitude. Now those persons who are living at the high altitude, who are the natives of high altitude, they are naturally acclimatized to their environment because they are born in that place. So their acclimatization or their adaptation to that environment is even better than those people who migrate from the sea level. In addition to all the changes that we have just discussed, they have certain other changes. They also have structural changes in the body in response to hypoxia at high altitude, which help them to acclimatize. And those structural changes include the increased size of the thoracic cavity. So the size of the thoracic cavity in the native human beings means the people who are born and grown at high altitude, the size of the thoracic cavity is increased, whereas the body size is decreased. So there is a high ratio of ventilatory capacity to the body mass. They also have hypertrophy of the heart. So hypertrophy of the heart increases the work capacity of the cardiac muscles, and they also have increased amount of hemoglobin. So these are the additional changes which are present in the native human beings. Now coming to the mountain sickness. Now mountain sickness is it is a disease which occur when there is failure to acclimatize. That is, if someone ascends to high altitude, migrates from the sea level to the high altitude, and body fails to compensate, and body fails to adapt to the body fails to adapt to high altitude, this failure to adapt or failure to acclimatize will result in a disease, in a condition which is known as mountain sickness. Sickness occurring at the mountains. Now mountain sickness is of two types. It is acute mountain sickness and it can be chronic mountain sickness. Acute mountain sickness, it develops about 8 to 24 hours after ascent to high altitude, and it can last for about 4 to 8 days. Failure to acclimatize, it occurs especially when someone ascends to high altitude rapidly. So if someone ascends to high altitude slowly, there is more chance that the person is going to acclimatize. But if someone ascends rapidly, so there can be failure of acclimatization, resulting in acute mountain sickness. As a result of failure to acclimatize, the person becomes acutely sick, and if he or she is not given oxygen, or if he is not brought back to sea level, the condition can worsen. Acute mountain sickness is characterized by nausea, vomiting, irritability, headache, insomnia. Insomnia means inability to sleep, and breathlessness. These are the signs and symptoms of acute mountain sickness. Again, I am repeating that acute mountain sickness is characterized by nausea, vomiting, irritability, headache, insomnia. Insomnia is inability to sleep. It's a sleep disturbance, and breathlessness. And in severe cases, two very important dysfunctions can occur, which include acute cerebral edema and acute pulmonary edema, and these can prove fatal. So these are different features of acute mountain sickness. Now we will move on to the other type of mountain sickness, which is the chronic mountain sickness. Now chronic mountain sickness, it develops in people living at high altitude too long, and we can say that it occurs as a result of complication of adaptations to high altitude. Again, I am repeating that chronic mountain sickness, it develops in people living at high altitude too long. Okay? And this is basically the complications resulting from the adaptations to the high altitude, meaning that those changes which occur in the body as a compensation to hypoxia, those changes or those physiological responses then produce complications, resulting in chronic mountain sickness. Now chronic mountain sickness is characterized by polycythemia, a too much increase in the number of RBCs. It then produces harmful effects over a long period of time. Polycythemia increases the viscosity of the blood, and it causes the sluggishness of the blood flow through the tissues, and which complicates hypoxia. Then there is increase in the pulmonary arterial pressure, This increase in the pulmonary arterial pressure is because of hypoxic vasoconstriction of the pulmonary blood vessels. So this is the property of the pulmonary blood vessels, that in response to hypoxia, the pulmonary blood vessels, they undergo vasoconstriction. This is opposite to the effect seen in the systemic circulation. In systemic circulation, when there is hypoxia, the systemic arteries are going and arterioles are going to dilate. But in case of pulmonary vasculature, exposure to hypoxia causes vasoconstriction. And because of vasoconstriction, the pulmonary arterial pressure is increased. And there is increased workload on the right side of the heart because of increase in pulmonary arterial pressure, because the right side of the heart has to work against high pressure, and this causes a progressive enlargement of the right side of the heart. In contrast, the peripheral arterial pressure, it begins to fall. Pulmonary arterial pressure begins to increase, while peripheral arterial pressure, it begins to fall, and patient may have congestive cardiac failure, and even death of the person can occur until and unless the patient is given sufficient care, given and is brought to the low altitude. So the condition of the people can recover when they are moved to the low altitude. So this was about the chronic mountain sickness. Now we are going to start with the deep sea diving physiology. Physiology of deep sea diving. Now the pressure changes in the deep sea are opposite to that we studied in the high altitude. When human being descend beneath the sea, the pressure around the body increases, and when we ascend to high altitude, the atmospheric pressure decreases. But when the human beings descend beneath the sea, the pressure around the body increases. Now this increase in pressure around the body, it compresses the body. So because of this compression or because of this high pressure surrounding the body, the lungs can collapse because the pressure outside the lungs is increased. Now to prevent the lungs from collapsing, the air must be inhaled at high pressure to keep them inflated. So divers under the sea, beneath the sea, they inhale air at high pressure. And why do they inhale air at high pressure? To keep the lungs inflated. Now, when they are inhaling air at high pressure, the blood is exposed to the high gas pressure. So, there is exposure of the blood in the lungs to high gas pressure. Now, this exposure of the blood to high pressure, high gas pressure, it causes tremendous alterations in the body physiology. So this is the basic point around which the physiology of deep sea diving revolves. So divers have to inhale high pressure air or high pressure gases when they are working under the sea in order to prevent their lungs from collapsing, and due to exposure of the blood to high pressure gas, there are alterations in the body physiology. Now when a person remains under the sea for a long time, this will cause a large amount of nitrogen to get dissolved in the body fluids. When we are at sea level and we are inhaling air at sea level, very little amount of nitrogen is dissolved in the body fluids and in the blood. But when a person is inhaling air at under high pressure, the amount of nitrogen which is dissolved in the body fluids, it is increased. Now nitrogen is a gas which is not metabolized in the body. So as long as the person is working on, or the person is beneath the sea, this nitrogen will remain dissolved in the body fluids. The problem arises when the person ascends back to the sea level. So when the person descends, the nitrogen is dissolved in the body fluids and it will remain dissolved because it is not metabolized. And when the person will return back to the sea level, the problem is going to arise. Now this slide shows us what happens when the divers return to the sea level. So this is at the sea level. When a person is at the sea level, little amount of nitrogen is dissolved in the body fluids. As the divers descend beneath the sea and inhales the air under high pressure, this causes a large amount of nitrogen to diffuse from the air into the blood, and then it gets dissolved in the body tissues, so in the body fluids, and it remains dissolved. Now as long as the person is under the sea, there is no problem. As the person ascends back to the surface, the problem can arise. There are two situations. One is if the person ascends back to the sea surface slowly. So if there is slow return to the sea surface, now what will happen? The nitrogen which is dissolved in the body fluids, it will be exhaled out as the person is slowly rising to the sea surface. So it will not cause any problem if the person returns to the sea surface slowly. The problem arises if the diver returns to the surface rapidly. So if the diver returns to the surface rapidly, what will happen is that nitrogen will not have enough time to escape or to leave the blood. Instead, it will remain within the body fluids and it will change from a dissolved state into the gaseous state, and this results in formation of bubbles. And here the problem arises and it results in a disease which is called as decompression sickness. Decompression sickness arises when a person working under the sea, it returns to the sea surface quickly. So there are many names for this disease. It is also known as Bend's compressed air sickness, Caisson's disease, divers paralysis, and dysbarism. So there are different names given to this disease. It is called as Bend's because of formation of the bubbles there is ischemia, and ischemia causes so much pain that patient bends. So that's why it is called as Bend's. Compressed air sickness, it is called so because this disease occurs, sickness occurs as a result of inhaling the compressed air, high pressure air. It is called as Caisson's disease because it was first, in the beginning it was discovered in the people who work in the caisson under the sea. Caissons are the airtight chambers in which engineers work under the sea. So, and divers paralysis, very obviously it is seen in the divers and it can cause paralysis. And dysbarism, that is a problem arising from the difference of the pressure. So these are different names given to the decompression sickness. Now this is the slide which shows that why there is bubble formation. As I just told you that when person ascend rapidly from under the sea to the sea surface, the nitrogen, it changes from dissolved state to gaseous state. and it results in formation of gas bubbles within the blood and within the body fluids, which causes the Caisson's disease or the decompression sickness. Now question is why there is formation of bubbles. Now to understand this, first we will see what happens when the person is under the sea. So when person is under the sea, the pressure around the body, outside the body is high, and the person is inhaling the air at high pressure, under high pressure. So in the lungs and in the body, the pressure is also high, same pressure that is in the surrounding of the body. So nitrogen is in dissolved state. It does not cause any problem as long as the person is under the sea. Now look at this part. When a person ascends to the sea surface, so he is decompressed. Compression means high pressure in the surrounding, and decompression means the pressure in the surrounding of the body is reduced when he is ascending to the sea surface. So pressure in the surrounding of the body is decreased, but the pressure within the body, the gaseous pressure in the body fluid is still high, because it cannot rapidly change, because nitrogen, which is dissolved in the body fluids, it cannot be rapidly exhaled out. It is exhaled out slowly. That's why it is required to ascend to the sea surface slowly, so that nitrogen can be exhaled out. But when person will rapidly ascend to the sea surface, nitrogen is not exhaled out. It is still within the body fluids, causing a high pressure. So pressure inside the body is high, pressure in the surrounding of the body is decreased. Now this difference of pressure will cause the nitrogen to change from a dissolved state into the gaseous state, and this will result in formation of bubbles. Nitrogen bubbles are formed within the body fluids throughout the body. These bubbles are also formed within the blood vessels. Now formation of the bubbles, which are the nitrogen bubbles, this results in blockage of many blood vessels in different tissues of the body. Now due to blockage of the blood vessels, there is ischemia, which results in the symptoms of the decompression sickness. So in most of the patients of decompression sickness, there is pain in the joints and the muscles of the arms and legs. About 5 to 10% of the patients have nervous symptoms, which can range from paralysis to collapse to unconsciousness. And about 2% of the people can develop chokes and can have respiratory symptoms and respiratory dysfunctions. So these are the symptoms of decompression sickness. Now how can we prevent the decompression sickness? It can be prevented by slowly ascending to the surface of the sea. As we have just discussed, that if person returns to the sea surface after staying long under the sea, if the person returns to the sea surface slowly, there will be no problem. So decompression sickness, simply it can be prevented by slowly ascending to the surface of the sea. The chances of the decompression sickness can also be reduced if the person working under the sea uses a mixture of helium and oxygen instead of air. So air is a mixture of nitrogen and oxygen mainly. So with nitrogen, it is the problem arises. Decompression sickness is caused by formation of nitrogen bubbles. So if instead of nitrogen, helium and oxygen is used in the breathing gas, then the chances of decompression sickness are reduced, because the solubility or the amount of helium which is dissolved in the body fluids and in the blood when the person is under the sea is very less. So chances of decompression sickness are reduced. Now how can we treat it? If someone develops decompression sickness, how can it be treated. In treatment of decompression sickness, the patient or the subject is again compressed to the same high pressure at which he was working under the sea. This is done by using the compression tanks. The subjects are put in the compression tanks in which pressure is in surrounding of the body is increased to the same high level at which he was working under the sea. And what will be the benefit of doing this? This will cause the nitrogen bubbles to again change into the dissolved state. By compressing, what will be the result? By compressing in the compression tank, it will cause the nitrogen bubbles to again change into dissolved state. So once the person is compressed to high pressure, then the person is slowly decompressed. That is, the pressure in the surrounding of the body is slowly decreased. When pressure is slowly decreased in the surrounding of the body, enough time is available for the nitrogen in the body which is dissolved to be exhaled out. So when the person is decompressed slowly, the nitrogen will be exhaled out from the body. So that's how the decompression sickness is treated. So that's all for the decompression sickness, which is an abnormality related to the deep sea diving. I hope you understand the lecture, and if you have any query, you are free to ask question. Thank you so much.